You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. It's Rapid Fire Thursday. I'm actually on vacation in Nashville right now with my best friends from high school, so I recorded this episode just a little bit early. And so today we're treated with several shorter stories, and that usually means the unusual is about to be discussed. And our first rapid fire story doesn't disappoint. The star of the show, a Kentucky man named Cowboy Cody. And with that kind of nickname, you might conclude he's like a gun-toting, Wrangler-wearing man, a la Billy the Kid or something like that. Well, if we went that direction, we couldn't be more wrong. Cowboy Cody's real name is Jonathan Mason, and he's 40 years old, and he lives alone on a nearby farm next to Murray, Kentucky. And I think Cowboy Cody might be loaded with lots of personality, especially if he is drunk. And I don't know how I missed his antics with his mule back in December, but I did. And that miss means we just get double the pleasure in the storytelling because Cowboy Cody is now back with a raccoon. All right, let's start with the mule incident, or incidences, because it's more than once Cowboy Cody got himself in hot water with his mule. Back on December 7th, Cowboy Cody, dressed in black jeans and a kind of like a button-down sage green shirt and a black cowboy hat, he rode his mule to the Big Apple Bar in Murray. Now, he tied up the mule outside, then went into the bar, and he apparently caused some mischief. Maybe Cowboy Cody was pre-gaming, who knows? Because pretty quickly he became unruly and he was asked to leave the bar. It's not shocking that he didn't leave. Bar staff of the Big Apple called the cops and Cowboy Cody staggered outside and got on his mule. Now I have video of the incident to play for YouTube listeners, but I'll explain it for podcast listeners. Cowboy Cody is surrounded by 5 cops. He gets pulled from the mule and kind of splayed over the hood of a small silver sedan.
Get off the horse now!
Now, when cops arrested Cody on the 7th of December, witnesses told authorities that Cowboy Cody was repeatedly whipping the mule while he was trying to leave the parking lot before police arrived. Now, Cody must have been released from jail pretty quickly because he was back at it with his mule on the 9th. That's just 2 days later. Midday on that Monday, Cowboy Cody was seen riding the mule down the middle of the street. He clearly wasn't sober, and when he was approached by law enforcement, he again refused to get off the mule, and he resisted arrest. All in all, for the 2 mule incidences, Cowboy Cody was charged with disorderly conduct, alcohol intoxication in a public place, criminal trespassing, resisting arrest, and of course, cruelty to animals. That was for the whipping of the mule. Now, I think people in Kentucky, they're the kind of forgiving type. So Cody is still a fixture there in Murray, still kind of warmly received, but he's not warmly received in the Big Apple Bar. This all due to his mule fiasco. So on Friday, when he tried to enter the bar, 37-year-old Mary Hafner tried to reason with him by saying, "Hey, come on, Cody, just go sleep it off." Mary actually thought it had worked because Cody left. But that ban didn't sit well with Cody. It was a Friday night, for heaven's sakes. He wanted to be in the bar. So he went back to his farm, or maybe he just went back to his truck. I don't know. But he went back and plotted his revenge. Cowboy Cody returned with a captured raccoon. And that capturing had happened earlier in the day. Well, he had the raccoon at the ready, and Cowboy Cody scooped it up and brought the raccoon into the Big Apple Bar and let it loose. Now, you might envision like a raccoon running around all wild and everything. That's not what happened. He actually just kind of waddled in, and according to Mary, the bartender, he looked a little scared. Well, Mary told her employee to back away, and she said she would handle it. But her employee didn't listen, and he tried to grab the raccoon by the tail as he was crawling after the raccoon on all fours. And the raccoon didn't take too kindly to that, so he turned and bit the employee on the hand. The man shrieked and backed away, and then Mary took things into her own hands by using some food to lure the raccoon onto a chair. She then used a towel to swaddle the raccoon and carry it safely from the bar. Mary told reporters that she isn't a city slicker, she's a country girl, and she knew she would have no problem catching the critter. The male employee has received his rabies shot, so we're all good there. And where was Cowboy Cody for all of this raccoon fun? Well, apparently he got back in his truck. And when law enforcement arrived, he refused to exit the vehicle. He was arrested and charged with third-degree criminal trespass, second-degree assault, resisting arrest, and failure to maintain insurance on his vehicle. Cowboy Cody is a pretty cool name. It fits him a little bit better than Jonathan Mason. And there's a real good chance we're going to hear from Cowboy Cody again. Now to the mysterious death of a University of Colorado freshman, Megan Trussell. This death has left her parents begging for help in raising funds for a private investigation because too many puzzle pieces aren't fitting into the suicide picture described by the Boulder County coroner. And all of this is according to her parents, Joe and Vanessa. We have to head back to February 9th of this year. On that day, Megan left her residence hall in Boulder, Colorado, wearing, like dark, they might be rust-colored. I was looking at the pictures. I think they might be rust-colored yoga pants. She also had on a bluish gray jacket and some chunky white athletic shoes. We have that footage. And then Megan disappeared. 3 days later, her parents reported her missing to authorities when she wasn't responding to multiple text messages. 3 days after that, Open Space and Mountain Park Rangers contacted the Boulder County Sheriff's Office. They were relaying that they had found a dead woman at 10:40 in the morning. The deceased female was in a remote area that's known for some difficult terrain. And you guys, it's rocky and it's snowy. It's February in Colorado. And so all of that made it impossible for humans to carry the woman's body out of the area for recovery. Instead, authorities rappelled to the dead woman and used evacuation equipment to remove her from the rocky area, and then they sent her body to the coroner's office for an autopsy. The woman was wearing dark yoga pants, and she had on a blue-gray shirt. That's how they described it, probably a sweatshirt, and her hair was colored light pink. With those unique identifiers, it seems authorities had found their missing woman, 18-year-old Megan Trussell. All right, pretty quickly, without the full autopsy results, the authorities began operating on the idea that Megan had died by suicide. But her parents, from the get-go, disputed this idea. Here's what they were saying. First off, Megan was only wearing one shoe. Her other shoe has never been recovered. And her cell phone and her purse were missing. Now, pictures of her leaving her dorm room on February 9th show the pink and blue, very distinctive crossbody bag draped from her right shoulder to her left hip. And those platform sneakers, well, they're not dainty, yet one of them is missing. And nearly 3 weeks after Megan's body was found, so this would be at like the first week of March, her purse was finally found. Except it was 6 miles from the rugged terrain that became Megan's final resting place. And Megan's mom then posted on Facebook that the purse was damaged, that the entire side seam had been ripped open. Vanessa wrote that the damaged purse and the missing shoe were leading her to believe that Megan was involved in some sort of struggle prior to her death. And that doesn't really match up with suicide. Well, during all of this time, without the full toxicology reports, the Boulder County Sheriff's Office made an X post that stated, quote, "We still have no reason to believe that there is or was a threat to the community." Now, a couple of weeks ago, the coroner's office finally released their full report, and Joe and Vanessa were completely caught off guard. The listed cause of death was toxic effects of amphetamines coupled with hypothermia. The Boulder County coroner, Jeff Martin, also found, quote, undigested prescription medication in Megan's system, and he said that validated his conclusion that the 18-year-old took her own life. Now, Megan's grieving parents say Megan's death has unanswered questions. Okay, we've talked about some of them. There's the shoe and the purse, but there's more. The coroner, Jeff Martin, admitted in the findings that the 4 months that it took to finalize the autopsy was longer than expected, but he said he hoped the, quote, heartbreaking findings would bring closure. Well, Joe and Vanessa aren't getting any closure because they were taken off guard when they discovered in the report, 4 months after Megan's death, that Megan had bruising on the back of her head and multiple chipped teeth. She also had indications of blunt force trauma to her body. Vanessa said the new information only strengthened her belief that Megan was involved in some sort of struggle before her death. The coroner called and explained the injuries that had occurred to Vanessa, but Vanessa said the coroner said those injuries didn't contribute to her death. Now, Vanessa and Joe believe that the undigested pills might be due to someone shoving pills down her throat and holding her mouth shut with force, which might be why the bruising existed on the back of her head. I mean, they're just speculating here because they just don't have answers. Vanessa also says the shoe has never been found, but Megan's phone, which was never found by police, has actually been tracked down by one of Megan's friends. That friend sleuthed out that Megan's phone had been sold into a smartphone kiosk. Video footage and payment then led to the discovery that a 50-year-old homeless man, his name's Elliot Beafor, well, he had turned in the phone and gotten money for it. However, when this information was given to the police said that they don't believe that Elliot ever had any physical contact with Megan. They did charge Elliot with stealing her phone and also with making false declarations to a pawnbroker. And they also told Vanessa and Joe that Elliot had told police that he got the phone from another homeless man. And get this, police think the second homeless man also had nothing to do with Megan, or they never were in contact with each other. So how did either guy get Megan's phone? That's a question that's got to be answered. All right. Where does this leave Vanessa and Joe? Authorities believe the case is closed, and Megan's parents don't agree. They've launched a GoFundMe to pay for a private lab to investigate the ruling of suicide. And so far, the crowdsource fund has raised almost $75,000. And Joe and Vanessa say that money will be used for comprehensive forensic testing of all of the evidence. Now, a $1,000 reward has also been set up for information leading to the discovery of Megan's shoe. So, if you know anything about Megan's death or the events surrounding her death back in February, please call the CU Boulder Police at 303-492-6666. And like I said, it's Rapid Fire Thursday, so here's another rapid fire story, except this one is out of Florida. Okay, have you guys seen Catch Me If You Can? That's the 2002 movie. Steven Spielberg directed it. Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks starred in it. And the film is based, at least partially, off a semi-autobiographical book by Frank Abagnale. See, Frank claims in his book that he pulled off cons worth millions of dollars by posing as a Pan America World Airways pilot. He also said he was a Georgia doctor, and then he also said he conned people as a Louisiana parish prosecutor. Okay, I saw Catch Me If You Can once. I've only seen it once, and it was probably over 2 decades ago. But as I can remember, it was a really good movie. Well, this Florida man, 35-year-old Tyrone Alexander, has been accused by federal prosecutors of scoring more than 120 free flights by posing as a crew member with at least 7 different airlines. 34 of those flights were with Spirit Airlines. Okay, it seems Tyrone would use faked credentials to book flights that are specifically set aside for pilots or air flight attendants. So he's pretending to be a pilot or an air flight attendant, and he's booking a free flight. Now, you book those flights on the carrier's website, and you have to have specific badge numbers and credentials to do so. So he booked and completed these flights from 2018 to 2024. That is, until Spirit Airlines started noticing his name was showing up too often. He could use his fake credentials, but he always had to use his real name because he needed to be able to make it through TSA, and that would require verification of his identity. Now, his flights were mostly continental. They were to places like Atlanta and Dallas and Las Vegas and Los Angeles and some lesser frequented airports. Tyrone had previously worked for an airline in Dallas, but obviously not as a pilot. It does seem in the reporting sources that he worked as a flight attendant for American Airlines, but he had been moved out of that position around 2015. Now, that varies depending upon what source you're reading, so I'm not quite sure if he was definitely there or just worked for an airline. But it seems in 2015, he was moved to customer service. I don't know what happened, but that's when he switched over to being a customer service rep. Now, during all of that work experience, he had figured out the system. When he was caught and arrested in 2024, he had been suspended from his job for about a year. Now, it's not reported what he did to earn that suspension, but we do know how he was caught. See, Spirit Airlines had alerted the TSA that they felt Tyrone had used the system to board those 34 flights. TSA flagged his name and began watching for him. And good old Tyrone couldn't help himself. He booked another flight to Australia from San Francisco, and when he tried to make it through TSA at the San Fran airport, he was detained by TSA and then arrested by federal agents. This month, in a federal Florida courtroom, Tyrone was found guilty of 4 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of entering a secure airport under false pretenses. Okay, that might not sound like a lot of charges for someone who allegedly jumped a flight for free over 120 times, but the penalty for those 5 crimes is pretty stiff. Tyrone could face up to 20 years in prison for each count of wire fraud and 10 years for the security offense. That's a potential 90 years in prison. He also could be forced to pay over $1 million in fines. He is scheduled to be sentenced in August of this year. And finally, on this Rapid Fire Thursday, what country is the least safe to visit? This is at least according to a study conducted by the financial comparison site HelloSafe. Now, the staff at HelloSafe created a travel safety index all based on 35 different criteria. Those 35 markers were placed into 5 different categories. And it seems HelloSafe was checking for things like frequency of natural disasters, or societal violence, or involvement in armed conflict. And that conflict can include like guns and knives and tasers and things like that. There was also the category of health infrastructure. So like a health infrastructure that would be established in case you got sick on vacation. How easy would it be for you to find care? Or also how clean is the overall infrastructure of the country? And then finally, the last category was militarization, meaning are you as a traveler and also are the citizens being protected by a military? Okay, those 5 indicators were then scored, and a country was given an overall score on a scale of 0 to 100. 0 being the best possible score and 100 being the worst possible score. Any guesses on the most dangerous place to visit with a score of 82 out of 100? It's the Philippines. Now, you might remember that back in October, a 26-year-old American, his name was Elliot Eastman. He went by Elliot Beastman on YouTube. Well, he was abducted and he's never been found. See, he had moved to the Philippines and built his channel around the concept that he was the first foreigner to live long-term in the Mindanao area. Okay, after being there for a year and after even marrying a local girl, He was pulled from his home by 4 men that were cosplaying as police officers. He tried to fight the 4 men off, but they shot him in the leg and stomach with a semi-automatic long weapon. His bleeding body was dragged to a motorized boat, and the men escaped into the sea with Elliot. Now, some people have been reporting that he died on that boat and was dumped at sea. Local police tried to arrest a few men, and when that occurred, a massive gunfight erupted. 3 of those men were killed. The other men were successfully detained, and they are now facing kidnapping charges. Okay, that's all happening in the Philippines on just one case. Reddit is quick to warn of very dangerous locales within the Philippines that are just overrun by gang activity. A terrorist group called Abu Sayyaf is also known for kidnapping foreigners and holding them for ransom in the Philippines. And even though the Philippines scored that high on the crime index, 5.5 million people visited the country in 2024. So tourism does happen. All right, which countries were number 2 and 3 on the crime index? Colombia was number 2 with a score of 79, and Mexico was number 3 with a score of 78. Both Colombia and Mexico were bumped up the list because of the frequency of kidnapping. Now, number 4 was India with a score of 77, and Russia rounds out the top 5 with a score of 75. So let's have some good news. Which countries are the safest? Well, Iceland is number 1 with a score of 18. Then it's Singapore at 19 on the crime index, then Denmark and Austria and Switzerland, all scoring a 20. And since I live in the US, I had to look. America is ranked the 14th most dangerous country with a score of 59. All right, you guys, that's your Thursday episode of Rise in Crime. Like I mentioned in the last episode, I'm anxiously awaiting talking to you about the Karen Reed trial. It's already happened. I know I'm late to the game, but that's because, like I said, I was in Nashville. So I will make sure I give any highlights on Monday's episode from that. And then if you enjoyed this episode or any of the previous episodes, please share it with a friend. It helps the podcast grow. We also love 5-star reviews on whichever app or maybe YouTube, wherever you're watching this. Make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe, make sure you follow. That helps all of the Oh No Media podcasts grow. Those 3 podcasts are Into the Dark, Murder with My Husband, and of course, Rise in Crime. You can join me again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.